Okay, finally, I'd like to just give you a few tips on things with cables, things to keep in mind, and some best practices. One, buy good cables. It's always a benefit. Hard to stomach the cost sometimes, but the payoff's good. And if you have a smaller studio and you don't need tons and tons of cables, it's definitely worth it. So I encourage you to try and get good cables anytime you can. Also, mark your cables. You can put things on the different ends, tape, labels, numbers. Some people use ponytail holders or tie wraps, things like that. Color code them. Just do things so that when you have kind of this snarl of cables behind your computer and your interface and stuff, and you have to go back there and kind of find the right one, it's easier to track down both ends of that cable and troubleshoot. It's also good with longer mic cables if you put little things like number stickers around the end or a piece of colored electrical tape on both ends so you know that the red cable is going into this mic, and then when you trace it back into the other room into your mixing board or interface, you know that also here's the red cable that's going into channel 1. So that's a good thing to do. It makes kind of routing and setting up systems a lot easier. Most cables have markings on them. If they're like stereo pairs, like speaker wire, you'll notice speaker wire, sometimes it's just black and you don't see anything, but there'll be little ridges in the vinyl or in the plastic coating. So just actually touch it with your hand, feel it with your finger. One side will have ridges and one will be smooth. When you run those wires from your amplifier to your speaker, just make sure that the red goes to the red and that stays the marked side and the smooth side goes to the black. It doesn't matter which side you use, just make sure that it's even and you use red to red, black to black, positive to negative, etc. There might also be printed markings. I'll see little strips of white ink on one side so that you know that that side, when you get to the other end of the other cable, wherever it is, you can know which side you're looking at. Use shorter cables whenever you can. As a signal travels through a cable, it degrades, and the longer it travels, the more it degrades. So it's good to make your cable runs as short as possible so that the quality of your signal stays as pure as possible. It's always good to have an array of short and long cables on hand for different tasks that come up, but when you're setting up your system, really try and use the shortest cables you can. It'll help you maintain the purity or quality of your sound, and it'll also make things a little bit neater and easier to work with. So if you can buy a couple of short cables and a couple long cables, that's a good idea. Especially when setting up a desktop or small project studio, you don't need 15-foot cables to run out of the box and then right to the input right next to it. You got a 3 or 4-foot cable, and that'll help you out. It'll keep things cleaner, and it'll also improve your signal quality. Finally, it's good to cross your audio and AC cables at 90-degree angles to reduce interference. And basically, when you're setting up and you have a bunch of studio stuff, a bunch of bands, and a bunch of microphones out, cables are going to cross each other. It's going to happen. If you find that point where they do cross, just kind of bunch up the microphone cables or the audio cables, and then lay that extension cord or power cord to an amplifier so that it crosses those cables at a 90-degree angle. This will greatly reduce the possibility of interference. It works, it's pretty simple, and tidies up the cables in certain spots too. So those are my tips on cables. Hopefully they'll help you have kind of a tidier workspace, better signal flow, stronger signals, and less interference.